Hey everybody, so today for Flatware Friday, I thought we would just chat. And I'm in the middle of a work day. And so there's some, just a few random things I was thinking about with Flatware, and I thought, let's just talk about it today. No real agenda or anything like that. So I had tried to make a Flatware Friday video. I think I mentioned it a few times, and it just wasn't coming together. And it was this I don't know. I had this idea for a video, and I don't know if it's my brain fog that's been happening a lot lately or stuff like that. It was not coalescing. And I actually filmed it, I think, and I finished it, and I was like, I'm not going to release that. It felt very negative, and it wasn't really the vibe that I usually go for. So first of all, before we get into that, what the video was going to be about, I'm going to pop up a picture that I came across on Facebook. Just something happy. This picture made me smile because it relates so much to our flatware selling, right? So this newlywed little couple, most likely she got her flatware set as a wedding gift, and she finished using it and she's putting it back in her little drawer. I'm sure it's silver plated. And discovers that the fork is missing. And so this picture was by George Hughes, it says, and it's called Finding the Fork. It's very Norman Rockwell-esque. And he's digging in the garbage to find that fork so that she can complete her little set. Anyway, I just wanted to share that one with you because I thought it was super cute. And it just kind of shows why selling flatware can be so profitable, because people are missing, they end up missing pieces. So kids throw stuff away, people scrape and they scrape stuff right into the garbage. Pieces get put into the garbage disposal so that their spoons get chewed up, things like that. So there's always a reason why there is a market for not just silver plated flatware, but stainless as well. And even some of just the basic patterns. So sometimes people are like, you know what, I just need a few more pieces to round out my set, and then I don't have to go buy a whole new set of flatware. Or they have grandma's set, and so, or they come across some pieces that was just like what grandma had at grandma's house. And so they're like, I'm going to put together my own set. I get those comments a lot from buyers, especially with the vintage flatware. Or they have just what's left of grandma's set, and so they want to fill it in a little bit more. So lots of reasons it's good to sell flatware. But anyway, the topic of the flatware thing that I wanted to say, or I had tried to make, was the idea was basically going to be flatware that I don't buy. And as I'm making the video, I'm like, I can't really make this video because there's always exceptions to the rule, right? So and there's so many different ways to do flatware, to approach it. And everybody has a different margin. They have different margins. They have different availability in their thrift stores. So I didn't feel like it would be right to just make these blanket statements of don't ever buy this flatware, or don't even buy this brand, or anything like that. So as I was making the video, I think I felt like I was saying, don't do this, but except you could do it now, it's too confusing, right? So it's kind of, if there is any theme to this video, it is just you do you, right? So I can give you, with Flatware Friday, I can give you some ideas. I can give you things that have worked for me. But what it really comes down to is just do what's best for you. And like I said, your availability, your listing style, the platforms you're using. I think there's a lot of potential with flatware, and there's all different ways to do it, okay? So the only thing I would say, the only one in my list that I was like, yes, for sure, don't buy this flatware was, and I'm going to put up a little video. There's a box of this flatware at my local thrift store, and it's very institutional, right? It's very they must use it at camps, or, they provide it for using in bulk or something like that. But it's very, very flimsy. It's usually not marked, or it's got some restaurant company, restaurant supply company mark on the back. But my rule of thumb for this flatware to not buy it is if it's flimsy. If you feel like you can like bend it yourself, then maybe skip it, right? So that's like the one I can say for sure. Like, just don't buy that flatware, no matter how much there is of it. Then I was, the next thing I had thought to put on my list was gold-plated flatware. And again, I can't say gold-plated flatware doesn't sell. I just personally, when I see it, I don't get super excited, okay? Here's the problem half the time. So if you do see gold-plated flatware, gold-toned flatware, one thing to look out for is the condition, okay? So a lot of gold-plated flatware can end up like having plate loss on it, and it just looks so much worse because it's gold and then the gray is showing underneath, right? So if I look at gold-plated flatware, it'll depend on condition. It'll depend on how cheap it is. I had this idea, it was a few years back when I was selling more flatware on Etsy the first time. And I was like, oh, gold-plated flatware sells because people are looking to do food photography, their tablescape, and, they use gold flatware for, to make their pictures look interesting or something like that. And I guess that can be true to a certain extent, but all I found was that my gold-plated flatware sold very, very slowly. I don't even know if I have any listed right now. I might have some on Ruby Lane. If I have it, I'll pop up a picture here. If not, I might like not have any right now because I'm not really buying it. Not that I've like come across it or anything. Yeah, I do have some for sale. I'll put up the picture. It's just electroplated stainless steel gold. It's like made in Japan. It's called Sarah Ann, and I have a full set, service for 4. So it is possible that if I move this off of Ruby Lane, which I intend to get my flatware off of Ruby Lane, and I put it onto eBay and I put it onto Etsy, it possibly could sell faster than this, because I think this was in good condition. I'm only asking like $36 for this set or something like that. So it's possible. You guys can stay tuned to my what solds. If I ever get around to actually moving this off of Ruby Lane and into the other sites with bigger audiences, then possibly, we could do okay with it. I'd be fine with $20, honestly. Just let's move it on. So again, I can't say like that was the problem coming up with making that video, was that I just felt like I was like giving caveats all the time. Like, oh, you can do this except, unless you do this or whatever, right? So you come across a nice gold-plated set, seems brand new, seems floral, you can get it super cheap, then why not flip it, flip it as a lot or whatever. Feel free, through this whole video, feel free to leave me comments down below with your experiences, because that's kind of the point. Like, I can give you my experiences, but if you want to share with viewers some of your experiences, it kind of just emphasizes my point, right? That all different things work for different people, okay? So the other thing, the rest of what I was talking about was mostly like there's certain brands that I wouldn't say I avoid. I am more cautious when I come across these brands. Okay, so like we've seen, there's plenty of really good brands in Cambridge. There's some pretty good brands. Patterns in Cambridge. There's some pretty good patterns in Hampton Silversmiths. Farberware is like so-so, like to me, right? So if I like looking at flatware and I flip it over, certain brands I see, I'm like, oh, that's not very exciting. Knowing how much flatware I have at home to list would probably make me leave that flatware at the store. And I also do find, now that I'm looking regularly specifically for flatware in this area, at first when we moved here to Montana, I was like, oh, there's so much less flatware than in Washington. In Washington, seriously, those thrift stores I could get flatware. That's why I have so much backlog. There was just so much flatware in the thrift stores. When I lived in North Carolina, hardly any. Even just now we went to go visit and I went to a few thrift stores and like I would have maybe bought like 1 or 2 pieces of what I saw. And I think, you know, I remember living there before, like and finding some at yard sales, and that's about it. But so different parts of the country, you guys have even talked about like your thrift stores aren't selling it, or the way they're selling it, they're just not selling the good stuff or whatever. So I totally get that. So if you're interested in selling flatware and you're going to the thrift store and maybe all you're coming across are those brands like Cambridge or, you know, Farberware or Cuisinart or things like that, and, you know, or just kind of a mishmash of kind of no-name vintage, like you could still make a profit on that flatware. But for me, because now that I'm looking, I'm like, well, I am coming across Oneida. I've come across Dance quite a few times. You know, I'm coming across fairly good brands of flatware. And because I have a backlog, I probably shouldn't be bringing home those lower, like to me, lower end brands, right? So some of those I'm a little more selective with. Okay, so I'm not just like, it's flatware. I'm just, let me just bring it all home, right? There's a few, like, there's Stanley Roberts is the company, but the mark on the back says Rogers Co. I usually skip those. I don't know why. They sell slow. Again, I think it goes back to like that flimsy. Like there can be Stanley Roberts flatware that's like solid and it's very mid-century looking, even though it's like maybe from the 80s or 90s. And then there's this Rogers Co. that's under that Stanley Roberts umbrella. And to me, it just feels very flimsy. It's not a solid handle. It's kind of like a stamped handle, if that makes sense. So, you know, if I do see something in those patterns and it looks like a fairly decent, like looking pattern, the condition looks good, say it's a bag of flatware for $2.99, yeah, I might grab them and I'll probably just list what's in that bag as one lot and sell it for $25 or something like that. There's, you know, that's just an easy no-brainer, but I probably wouldn't take the time to divvy it up into forks or whatever. And again, that's all going to depend on researching, you know, how you're going to list it. Just a few other names that I kind of, again, so I said Cambridge. I don't get super excited about International, believe it or not. It's one of the biggest ones. International Stainless, again, it depends on the pattern. I just bought some International Stainless, but I'll show it to you in a minute. There's Rogers Cutlery is a mark that's under International Stainless. I don't usually pick those up. Wallace, for me, moves super slow. The Wallace Stainless, I usually skip that. Like the Cellar or Retro New, Brandware, or some just different names I've kind of come across. And again, like some of those brands, Rogers Co. maybe might have, if I remember correctly, a bamboo pattern. And so I would probably pick that one up. But I know it's not like one of the solid handle ones. It's a little bit different. So I've talked about in other videos, you know, brands that I definitely look for, and we can talk more about that in future videos as well. So this was just going to kind of be a chat. Again, for it to be a chat, like you need to talk too, right? So feel free to leave comments down below, your experiences with some of these patterns, but also leave comments like, what's the flatware situation like in your thrift stores if you're, you know, interested in selling it. I remember someone had made a comment that there were certain brands like that they skip because they can come across good brands on a regular basis, and so they didn't have to spend the time. But, you know, honestly, if you are buying flatware for 25 cents and you can sell it for $2, $3, $4, $5 or something like that, it's easy, right? It's easy to list. It's easy to ship. So anyway, so here's one of the flatware buys I've made recently. It's a pattern I have sold before, and like I said, it's international. So it came at the thrift store all wrapped up in this flatware tray. And what's nice about the flatware tray is that it's new. It's by Joseph. So I'm going to definitely try to sell that tray separately. But I paid a little bit more for this just because I've sold it before. And so, and it was really working out to like $1 a piece, which is more than I usually spend on flatware. But this will be easy. Okay, so the pattern, it is by International. And I'll show you the kind of end. It's like floral. And the mark on it, though, does not say International. It says Lion or Lyon, Lyon. In a little oval, it says Lyon Stainless. And then right on it, it says the name of the pattern. So it's one of those. And it says Queen's Fancy. So it's a nice, solid, piece of flatware. So I did come across a big lot of this at another thrift store, and I sold a bunch of it on Ruby Lane. So I do still have some listings from that last bunch. So again, I'll be pulling those off of Ruby Lane, combining it with these and getting them listed over, I think, on eBay and Etsy, because these are vintage. So I think what I have left over on Ruby Lane are mostly like little serving pieces. Like I have cocktail forks and I have like little butter spreaders and things like that. But I've already sold like the dinner forks and salad forks and things like this. Now, it gave me a list. This thrift store puts a little like sticky note of what's included in here. So it just says there's 8 knives. Not excited about that, but anyway. 6 forks, 6 tablespoons. This is what they use. We've talked about that before. So the bigger oval soup spoons or the place spoons or the dinner spoons or whatever you call it in your neck of the woods. There's 5 solid forks. There's 13 teaspoons. And then there's the storage container. So I do have, what was I going to say? I do have some teaspoons, I think, left in that lot, from that lot as well. No dinner, oh, no, it says forks, 6 forks. So I think I had looked up and found a listing where they sold 4 dinner forks for like $60 or something like that. And then another one was like $45. So say, $10 a piece. So even if I sold 4 dinner forks, I've got my money back because I paid $45 for this whole lot. And there's like 38, I think they're actually counting the drawer. They say 39, but I think they're counting the drawer. And that, a little over $1 a piece. And so I think I can do okay with that. Now, the only other thing I wanted to talk about, and they're in pretty good shape, so that's easy. The only other thing I wanted to talk about today, as far as just flatware chat, is one of the questions I get the most is how should I list, I just found these 40 pieces or whatever, how should I list them? So again, it's going to depend on a few different things. Okay. So first thing I do when somebody asks me that question, they tell me the pattern, is I go look at the pattern on eBay and I kind of see how people are selling it. How rare it is. Rare doesn't necessarily always mean good. It could mean no one's looking for it. So, I look at that. I look at the pieces I have. A lot of sellers these days, more and more, are just using variation listings. And so that's totally a possibility that I could consider for these. I could, make one listing and have everything I have available in that one listing. And a lot of sellers are doing that. And I think you can make pretty good money doing it that way. The only problem I have with it that kind of makes me hesitate to do variation listings right now is that I like to cross post. I have been selling actually quite a bit of flatware on Poshmark. I like to cross post into Etsy because I get a different audience over there that buy things. So I would have to do like a variation listing on eBay, and then I'd have to start all over again and do a variation listing on Etsy. And that's not working because once things sell from one or the other, it's not matching up, right? So we're not doing that. So I could just do my usual, which is what I'm more comfortable with. I could do my usual, okay, I'll probably put all 6 dinner forks in one listing. I could put the 8 dinner knives in one listing, you know, things like that. The teaspoons I'd break up into groups of 4, depending on how many I have with the other one. And, you know, I would just group things up and I'd have like multiple listings of it. So those then could get cross-posted. The only other consideration too, not the only one, but another consideration is like, how do you guys like, there's days where I don't feel like doing that because it can be kind of tedious where you're making the same list. I mean, it can go pretty quick because you can make your first listing and then you just sell similar and all you have to do is change out your photos and then the details, right? And that can go pretty quick. If that doesn't bother you, you know, just it gets kind of monotonous. Some sellers they would take this and like say, you know what, I'm just gonna put the whole thing together and try to just double my money, right? Just move it quickly. Totally valid to do that as well. So anyway, that's kind of the point, is like there's so many different ways to do things with flatware. You can sell even in smaller, like you could take the dinner forks and just have a picture of one and do quantity 6. And then another listing teaspoons, you know, one teaspoon quantity, whatever. So that's kind of like it's kind of like doing the variation listing, but just divide it up. So anyway, different options. I'm learning things about myself too, as far as flatware, that I am more excited about listing little, like when I find 2 or 3 of like a fork at a thrift store, I usually will come home and list those right away. Like, I don't know. It's like a one and done kind of thing. But when I find a bigger lot like this, to me, I build it up in my head like, oh, that's a project. I got to work on that. So now, you know, so I'm starting to even rethink like the storage that I have for flatware. Because I do tend to like, oh, I only have like 2 of these. I'll save them until I find more, and then the listing will be more worth it. And I'm kind of second guessing that strategy as well, because I should just be moving flatware. Like I should just try to like list it and sell it. But I don't know. By next week, I could change my mind. Anyway, you know me. So there are a few patterns that I have saved and waited, and sure enough, at the thrift store, I come across it again. And so I can now put 4 dinner forks together or such. But I suppose if you did kind of just run your variation listings, then as you found pieces, you can just add to the listings that you've got going. That's also an option as well. But so again, like I said, you do you. And it's all a learning curve, right? I've sold flatware off and on for a lot of my reselling career, and I've done it all different kinds of ways. And, you know, the market can change. We didn't have all this cross-posting back in the day, so that wasn't even a consideration. So I think, you know, you just kind of go with the flow and try things out for you, right? So, you know, that's kind of like, I don't mean to be snarky or anything about the you do you, right? I just think there's so many different ways to do this and be successful at it that you don't need, like, just because I sell a lot of flatware, you don't have to do it exactly the way I do it. You could find a way that works like totally good for you too, right? So I think that's my only point that I was trying to make with all this. Okay, so I'm gonna wrap it up right now. Just wanted to share just some thoughts I've been having. And like I said, they weren't quite coalescing into a video. Nothing I wanted to put out there as like a definitive, like, don't do this, right? Because you could do this and it would be great, you know, and it'll work out good for you. So Okay, I think I've beat that subject to death, and I will see you guys soon with another video.